Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ganaganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ganaganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shringaratanma Diramarjanado Juktasya bhaktam sa niyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Kridaiva Truptim Vajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Shiradikama Dhabayarapara Madhura Lila Gunarupanamna Shiradika Para Madhura Lila Pratikshana Dhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Dhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Nekunjayuno Ratikeri Siddhai Jayalibhir Jukti Apekshaniya Nikunjayuno Tatra Atidaksha Atibalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam. Saccadharidena Shamasta Shashre Ruktastatthava Bhataiva Sadhavi Saccadharidena Shamasta Shashre Ruktastatthava Bhataiva Kintu Prabhurja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Kintu Prabhaja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gurashi Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado Dayam Sturvam Stasya Yashastrin Sandhyam Bande Gurashri Charanara Vrindam Dayam Sturvam Stasya Yashastrin Sandhyam Bande Gurashri Charanara Dhyayam Stuvam Stasya Yashastin Sandhyam Bande Gurashri Charanara Vrindam Dhyayam Bande Gurashri Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Desha Tarine Namaste Deve Gauravani Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhara Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Adharara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govindaram Shimadhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jayo Jagannath Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra Subhadrama Jayo Sitaram 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 Jayo Lakshman Hanuman Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Premanande Haribo Jaya Vishwapar Paramsa Prabhaja Kacharya Suttara Sarasi Samad Iskon Pratishta Bhaviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana His Divine Grace Abhacharavina Bhakti Viranta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhari Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Jayananta Kuti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Prem Sikho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shubhasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Jai Paramadayal Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai Jai Premanama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Satchinandana Shriman Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaura Hari Mahavaranya Avatar Ki Jai Kolokira Pramadhana Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai Yoga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai Brihat Midanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopakupna Radha Kund Syama Kund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Brajabhim Vrindavan Mathur Dham Ki Jai The Lordship Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Navadvip Ekachakra Dham Ki Jai Paramakuruna Shri Gaura Nitai Ki Jai Shri Purushottam Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smaspadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Kani Shingare Bhagavan Ki Jai Ganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulas Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Pulishrimati Radharani Ki Jai Shamaveta Bhakta Vinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaurari Pramanande All glories to the assembly bodies, all glories to the assembly bodies, all glories to the assembly bodies, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gaura. Namaste Narasingaya. Namaste Narasingaya. Pralada lada da hoine. Pralada lada da hoine. Hiranyakasipu Bhaksha. Silatang kanakalaye. Jaya silatang kanakalaye. Ito nisinga parato nisinga. Jato jato jamita to nisinga. Bahir nisinga, hrudaye nisinga. Narasingha Madim Sharanam Prapade. Tabakara Kamalavare Nakram Adavata Singha Dalita Hiranyakasipo Tana Bringam Kesavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Hey Jai Jagadisha Re Hey Jai Jagadisha Re Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adavata Singha Dalita Hiranyakasipu Tana Bringa Kesavadita Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Kesavadruta Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Hey Jai Jagadisha Re Hey Jai Jagadisha Re Kesavadi Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Hey Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jaya Nisingade Jaya Nisingade Nisingade Jaya Nisingade Nisingade Jaya Narahari Jaya Narahari Narahari Jaya Narahari Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Prahlad Maharaj Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Pralanara. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. जय श्री भक्ति पद सर्वविघ्न विनाशनाथ सिंहरि भगवान की जय। जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की। गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाय तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारिरेवि सत्वताय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारिरेवि सत्वताय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रारिरेवि सत्वताय नमो नमः। जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण नमः। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाव विलासी। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाव विलासी। राधा जे तुम्हार शरणला तारा वंच पूर्णा। जे तुम्हार शरण तारा वंच कृपा करे करतरे वृंदावनवासी। तुम्हें कृपा करे तरे वृंदावनवासी। मोराय विलास कुंज दियोबा। मोराय Nayane Ribo Sada Jogala Ruparasi. Amen. Namo Namaha Enibe Nanadara Shakirayano Gatakara Eniveda Sevayadikara Diye Koroni Jadasi. Nina Krishna dase koi e enamorao Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sarai Navasi. Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sarai Navasi. Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Janika Nisha Papani Brahmatyarika Nisha Tani Tani Pranasanti Prarakshina Pari Pari. Janika Nisha Papane Brahmatarika Nisha Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pari Pari. Janika Nisha Papane Brahmatarika Nisha Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pari Pari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Tulsi Maharani Brinda Devi, Jaya Tulsi Maharani Shri Brinda Devi. Nitai Gora Haribo, oh Haribo, Nitai Gora Haribo, Shri Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namo Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namo Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namo Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also grant me a residence and pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavya Damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpanamajana Mahadavangi Vatanam Shri Akari Chandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadu Jivanam Ananda Buddhivardhanam Patiparam Purnamrita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smarena Kala Pita Visitava Vipaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durhaivam Krishna Yajaninanda Nagapi Sanichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Amanadena Kirtanya Sada Hari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagadi Shakamaye Mama Janmane Janmaneshwari Bhavata Bhaktira Itukitwai Ai Nandatanu Jakin Karam Paritama Vishame Bhavam Budho Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja Sthita Dhuli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Kalorashudharaya Varanam Gadagadharudaya Gira Pulakaya Nichitam Bapurukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisyati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakyusha Pravrasaitam Shunyaitam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Asli Shava Padaratam Pinastuma Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Thava Viradhatulam Pato Mat Pranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Namo Varannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratve Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Viranta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pachatyati Satarine. Jai. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the and enables us to fully test the nectar for which all is earnesses. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and stroll in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, somehow or other I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering the moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and should remain so, even if hundreds me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, to blaspheme the vet, but to dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider the names of demigods, our Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literatures or scriptures and pursuance of Vedic version. 5, to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation to the holy names of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8, to consider the chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, which often varies as fruitive activity karma kanda. 9, to instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10, to not have complete faith in chanting of the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even for understanding so many instructions on this matter. It was so an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto the Vaishnavas. They are just our desire trees, they can fulfill the desire of everyone. And they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Pancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu vyaivacha patitanam papanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namo. Jai Ananta Krishna Vindu Ki Jai.
Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Jnanatirandasya Jnananjana Sarakaya Chaksurmilitanina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Swapatam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pachakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunitan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padichana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradhan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shiva Savanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaya Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhuve Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Harini Rupanuga Viruddha Papa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Lambara Sambodhe Padamba Jayate Namaha Bhaktijanandam Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Bhavapumisam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Shri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanshakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chise Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhakta Kam Nabhami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadambo Jo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Drindaranya Kalpadumadaha Shimad Ratnagada Simasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasaran Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venus Swaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Rishabhanustute Devi Mami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Satma Sakalpa Riksha Laksha Vrite Susura Vipalyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kanantam Haravinda Dalayataksham Varhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandar Pakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranay Keli Kalavilasam Shyamam Chibanga Lalitani Taprakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakilendri Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Chaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vedesu Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manasobani Purgamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Jayatam Jagadanda Kotim Yaschakti Rasti Jagadanda Jaya Danta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Jayantarastam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayanabusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bistabirya Eva Nijarupa Daya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhutto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Devi Desa Vilokante Yam Shama Sundaram Chinta Guna Swarupam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menetistam Nanavataram Makaro Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramampamam Yo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanta Koti Kotis Vasesa Vasadadi Vibhuti Benam Tad Brahmaniskalam Anantam Vaseta Bhutam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Yasya Jagadanta Satani Sute Dragunya Tadvisaya Vida Vidaya Manam Sattva Para Sattvam Visuddha Sattvam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasatmate Amanasya Praninam Prativalam Smaratam Upetya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jaya Yajastram Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yoglokanamni Nijadamni Tarechata Shadami Vid Maheswarita Nasatesha Tete Prabhavani Chavita Sayena Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sastista Pralaya Sada Sakti Reka Jayevi Yasya Bhuvanani Vibhati Durga Ichana Rupam Yasya Testa Sesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Kshiram Yatadadi Vikara Visesi Yoga Sanjayate Nahita Tapritakaste Hetu Yasambutama Pitatasam Paitikaryat Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Devi the Santanam Abhipetya Dipayate Vite Samana Dharma Yastaja Gavi Hicha Vishnutaya Abhibati Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajali Badhismi Yoga Nidharma Nanta Jagananda Sarama Kuba Adhara Saktima Valamya Param Samurtim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaikan Isvasita Kalamatabalambya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasekala Visesha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Paswanya Tasma Sakaleshna Jesu Tejas Riyamki Yat Prakatiya Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidaya Kumbadwande Pranama Samayesa Kanadi Raja Vignan Vyanta Malamas Jagatrayasa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Maruti Sasha Kalas Tatarpaman Sati Jagatrayani Yasmat Bhavanti Bhavanti Visanti Ancha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yas Chaksuresa Savitasa Kalagrahanam Raja Samasta Sunamurti Sesa Teja Yasyagaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmota Papa Nichaya Stutastapam Sri Brahmadi Kita Patakavati Yasjiva Yadata Matri Bhava Prakadapa Bhava Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrinda Gopamatavenda Mahosva Karma Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kinticha Bhakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kamasa Japranayadi Biti Vatsaya Moha Guru Gaurav Sevya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kapatarava Jumabu Mischintamani Ganama Itoyam Amritam Kataga Anam Natyam Gamanam Apivansi Priyasaki Chiranandam Jyoti Parama Pita Daswatyam Apichasa Yatra Shirade Bhisravati Surabi Vyastisumana Nimesa Dakyava Vachitinahi Hatravi Samaya Bhajesrita Dukram Tamaha Ihal Golakam Ityam Vidantas De Santakshite Viralacharya Katipaye Shri Guru Vastika Prayers Kije. Spiritual message receiving benediction from the ocean mercy, just as a cloud pours water in the forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual message delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. Offer my respectful obeisance unto lotus feet. Such spiritual master whose notion of what's wishes qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing next to singing, playing musical instruments. Spiritual master is always glad by the sanctified movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the melodies of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto lotus feet. Such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship of Sri Radha and Krishna. He also engaged his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform some worship for the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto lotus feet. Such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is lit, shuddha, and drug. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied being Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied with my respectful basis. Unto lotus feet, such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal bliss of Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful basis unto lotus feet, such spiritual master. Spiritual master is very dear because he's expert at assisting the devotees who at different times with different tastional arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. For my most humble obeisance unto lotus feet is such spiritual master. The spiritual master to be honored as much Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all discourse and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto lotus feet, such spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. His divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Text number 29. Shri Sukha Uvacha Brahma Sapa Pade Sena Kalin Amoga Vinchitaha Samritya Swakulam Sritam Tyakshan Deham Achintayat. Shri Sukha Uvacha. Shri Sukha Deva Goswami said, Brahma Sapa, cursing by the Brahmanas, Apadesena, on the plea by such a show, Kalena, by the eternal time, Amoga, unfailing, Vanchita, one who so desires, Samhritya, closing, Swakulam, own family, Spritam, excessively numerous, Tyakshan, after giving up, Deham, the universal form, Achintayat, thought to himself. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sukadeva Goswami replied, My dear king, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth after dispatching his excessively numerous family members. He thought to himself as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the word Tyaksham is very significant in relation to Lord Sri Krishna's leaving his body. Since he is the eternal form of existence, knowledge, and bliss, his body and his self are identical. Therefore, how is it possible that he would leave his body and then disappear from the vision of the world? There is a great controversy amongst these non-devotees or Mayavadis about the mysterious disappearance of the Lord, and the doubts of those men with a poor fund of knowledge have been very elaborately cleared by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha. According to Brahma Samhita, the Lord has many forms. It is stated therein that the Lord has innumerable forms, and when he appears within the vision of the living entities, as Lord Krishna actually appeared, all such forms amalgamate with him. Besides all these infallible forms, he has his universal form as manifested before Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Here, in this verse, the word spitam is also used, which indicates that he left his gigantic universal form called the Virat Rupa, not his personal eternal form, because there is hardly any possibility of his changing his form of Satchitananda. This simple understanding is at once realized by the devotees of the Lord, but those who are non-devotees, who perform hardly any devotional service to the Lord, either do not understand this simple fact or purposely raise a controversy to defeat the eternality of the transcendental body of the Lord. This is due to the defect called the cheating propensity of the imperfect living entities. By practical experience also, it is seen up to the present day that the Lord's transcendental form is worshipped by devotees in different temples, and all the devotees of the Lord factually realize that the form of the deity in the temple is non-different from the form of the Lord. This inconceivable performance of the internal potency of the Lord is described in Bhagavad Gita 7.25, Naham prakasasarva sel yogamaya samanvritaha. The Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone. In the Padma Purana, it is said, Atakshi Krishna Nama di Nabra Vidgayam Indriyai. The name and form of the Lord cannot be perceived by the material senses, but when he appears within the vision of the mundane people, he assumes the form of the Virat Rupa. This is an additional material exhibition of form and is supported by the logic of a subject and its adjectives. In grammar, when an adjective is taken away from the subject it modifies does not change. Similarly, when the Lord quits his Virat Rupa, his eternal form does not change, although there is no material difference between himself and any one of his innumerable forms. In the 5th canto, it will be seen how the Lord is worshipped in different planets in his different forms even now, and how he is worshipped in different temples of this earth also. Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura have very elaborately explained this incident of the Lord's disappearance in their commentaries, quoting various authentic versions of the Vedic literatures. We purposely do not include them all here to avoid an increase in the volume of this book. The entire matter is explained in Bhagavad Gita as quoted above. The Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone. He always keeps himself out of the vision of the non-devotees who are devoid of love and devotion, and thus he puts them still further away from the Lord. The Lord appeared on the invitation of Brahma, who prayed before the Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, and therefore when the Lord appeared, all the forms of Vishnu amalgamated with him, and when the mission was fulfilled, all of them disintegrated from him in the usual course. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Granth Raj Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sukadeva Goswami replied, "My dear king, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth. After dispatching his excessively numerous family members, he thought to himself as follows." So this is a wonderful purport because it reveals many, explanations of mysterious things that the Lord is capable of. And one of those is that he does not reveal himself to the non-devotees, but for a sincere devotee who's always chanting his holy names and engaged in his service with love and devotion, the Lord reveals himself. Yeyatamam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham manavartam te manushyaparta sarvasaha. As one surrenders unto me, Krishna says, I progressively, or I proportionally reveal myself to him. So everything depends on our surrender to Krishna. And it's a personal decision that we have to make. Every day we have to make decisions whether I want to surrender to Krishna or whether I don't want to surrender to Krishna. That's why it says, Manishyanam sahasresu kaschit jati siddhaye jatatammaphi siddhanam kaschit mam viti tattvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So it's a very rare thing for someone to become a pure devotee. Krishna explains something in the purport that's amazing. He says, he is the last word in Brahman realization, and the devotees alone can realize him as he is. Therefore, as it said, Atakshi Krishnanama dinabha vedgraham indriyai sevan mukhehi sujivados swayam eva spurat yadam. This is a very important verse. No one can understand Krishna as he is by the blunt material senses. But he reveals himself to the devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service unto him. It's a Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.234. This is confidential knowledge. It is not revealed to everyone. Therefore, access to Krishna is only through Bhakti Yoga. Bhaktyamam avijananti yavanyaschasmi tattva mam tattvato gyatvad vishatetad anantaram. I can only be known by devotional service. Also, Krishna says in the 11th chapter, in a very important verse, he says, first of all, he says, Naham Vedaya tapasa na dani na chejya yaya sakya evam vido dastram dristavan asimam yata. Very important verse. 1153 says, the form you are seeing, Arjuna, with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am. So here we see this verse and the next verse explaining this most mysterious thing, that Krishna is not perceived by any mechanical process, whether it's chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, whether it is engaging in many different worships and rituals, whether it is by studying the Vedas. One ultimately can only understand Krishna when Krishna chooses to reveal himself to the devotee, and that's only because the devotee's full engagement in devotional service. Therefore, he says, Krishna first appeared before his parents, Devaki and Vasudeva, in his four-handed form as Narayana, and then he transformed himself into his two-handed form. This mystery is very difficult to understand for those who are atheists or for those who have simply, in other words, for those who are devoid of devotional service, and for those who are scholars who have simply studied the Vedic literature by way of grammatical knowledge or mere academic qualifications. Krishna is not possible to understand, nor is he to be understood by persons who officially go to the temple to offer worship. They make their visit, but they cannot understand Krishna as he is. Krishna can be understood only through the path of devotional service, as explained by Krishna himself in the next verse. Bhaktya tvananyaya sakya ham evam vidurir janagyatam drastum chitatpena pravestum cha parantapa. And it says 1154, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can one enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So here we have many shastric evidence that one cannot understand Krishna by any mechanical process. It's only possible if they engage in loving service of the Lord. So there's this mystery about love of God. And this is what's missed by many people. It's also said that Brahmanas are not qualified to be gurus. This is another main point. And we'll go back to the previous point where we started from, that Krishna is the last word in Brahman realization. So these are very important instructions. Brahman realization, according to the Mayavadis, stops with the Brahma Jyoti. That is not only patently wrong, it's misleading. Way beyond Brahman realization of the Mayavadis is Paramatma realization, and far, far beyond that is realization of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of the Brahman, the source of the Paramatma, the source of the material universe, so, and the material energy, and the source of all the jivas, and of all incarnations. Now, what is another major point that's being emphasized in this purport today is when Krishna appears, he amalgamates all his other expansions into his transcendental original spiritual body, Ishvara Paramakrishna Sachitananda Vigraha. And therefore, when in his pastimes, for example, when he's going to kill Bhisma Pitamaha, he appears with a chakra in the Narayana form. So this is completely confusing. And when he appears before Vasudeva and Devaki, because they think that God is Narayana, he appears in his Narayana form. And then they both become very, very upset, because they think if Kamsa sees him in his Narayana form, he will kill him. So they pray that he appears as an ordinary boy with two arms. And Krishna does that. But unbeknownst to them, that form is the origin of Narayana and all other incarnations. So there's a great mystery that's impossible to be understood by the Mayavadis, impossible to be understood by anyone else other than a pure devotee of the Lord. Now, the main point is that a Brahmana cannot become a bona fide guru unless he is a pure Vaishnava. That's an extremely important point. It's misunderstood by many people. That's why people accept just about anybody as a guru or even worse, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is explained. And also, there's another point, and we'll come to that, but this is explained in the why Brahmana is not sufficient for being a representative of the Lord, because he's still in the mode of goodness or mundane goodness. This is explained in the next verse, which says, text 31. We'll go over that tomorrow, but I want to make this point. And Prabhupada says, the specific qualification for becoming the representative of the Lord, well, obviously a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of the Lord, is to be unaffected by the material modes of nature. The highest qualification of a person in the material world is to be a Brahmana. But since a Brahmana is in the mode of goodness, to be a Brahmana is not sufficient for becoming a representative of the Lord. One has to transcend the mode of goodness also, and be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of material nature. This stage of transcendental qualification is called Suddha Sattva, or Vasudeva. And in this stage, the science of God can be realized. So these are amazing points that Prabhupada is making, and it takes a long time to assimilate them, to understand them, because of our conditionment. We have to actually be above the influence of the modes of material nature. So, that is further explained. It says the stage of transcendental qualification is called Suddha Sattva, or Vasudeva. And in this stage, the science of God can be realized. That means one has to transcend the mode of goodness also, and be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of the material nature. As the Lord is not affected by the modes of material nature, so a pure devotee of the Lord is also not affected by the modes of nature. Now, the practical example of that is the following. This is the primary qualification for being one with the Lord. A person who is able to attain this transcendental qualification is called Jivan Mukta, or liberated, even though he is apparently in the material condition. The liberation is achieved by one who constantly engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And in the Brahma Samhita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187 is said, Iha yasya haler dashe karmana manasajira akilasvapi vastasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. Nikilasvapi avastasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. Anyone who, by his actions, mind, and words, lives only for the transcendental loving service of the Lord is certainly a liberated soul, even though he may appear to be in a condition of material existence. Uddhava was in such a transcendental position, and thus he was selected to be the factual representative of the Lord in his bodily absence from the vision of the world. Such a devotee of the Lord is never affected by material strength, intelligence, or even renunciation. Such a devotee of the Lord can withstand all onslaughts of material nature, and therefore he is known as Goswami. Only such a Goswami can penetrate the mysteries of the Lord's transcendental loving relationships. This is hugely important points. These are hugely important points. And just to demonstrate that, we can go into history and see examples of what's being said here. We can go into the history of ISKCON, and we can go into previous history, and there are many examples of what Prabhupada has explained here, and this is basically confidential information. For example, right after Prabhupada's disappearance, a new phenomenon evolved in ISKCON. There were certain devotees who were appointed by Srila Prabhupada to be Ritvik gurus, that is, a person who initiates on behalf of the spiritual master. And he also indicated that once he left his body, then they would initiate in their own name. In other words, the disciples would become their disciples after Prabhupada's disappearance. But during Prabhupada's disappearance, they should be initiated as disciples of Prabhupada, even though he was not physically present in the initiation ceremony. They were the Ritvik. A Ritvik is someone who performs fire sacrifices on behalf of the Guru. And one purpose of a fire sacrifice is to perform a marriage or to initiate someone into Krishna consciousness. So what happened was, after Prabhupada's disappearance, some, or maybe all, of those devotees who were appointed, and there were at least 11 of them, they began to say that they should be worshipped in the same way as Srila Prabhupada, because they were on the same level of Prabhupada now. Now this was a test. Just like what we're hearing today is that why did Krishna, before he left, plan the self-destruction of the Yadu dynasty, which were all his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Well, this is an important reason why. He didn't want to leave them in the material world without his personal presence, because they were all endowed with tremendous powers that were not equal to Krishna, but almost in many ways. And therefore, to leave them without the association of Krishna would endanger them to get puffed up by all those powers and misuse them. So therefore, he first made a decision that they should self-destruct, and that's what they did. And but by doing that, they didn't go to the lower planets, or they didn't stay in the material world or go to the hellish planets. They went back to Godhead with the Lord. They were all liberated. The ones that were demigod, some of them may have achieved their position as demigods again, but generally it says they were all liberated. And it says here, it says, verse 29, "My dear king, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth. After dispatching his excessively numerous family members, he thought to himself as follows." Well, he says, "Now I shall leave the vision of this mundane world, and I see that Uddhava, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me." Whoa, that's a huge statement. Krishna has millions of sons and grandsons, and maybe great-grandsons. Out of all of them, he chooses Uddhava. Why? Because he says he is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me. So, what we saw after Prabhupada's disappearance, of course, Prabhupada's disappearance doesn't mean he's not with us. He's not with those who break the regulative principles, but those who follow the regulative principles and sincerely engage in devotional service and have love and devotion for Prabhupada, and they're beginning to have that also for Krishna. Prabhupada never left them. But devotees or those persons who broke the regulative principles, in a sense, they cut off their own relationship with Prabhupada. Now, because they cut it off, Prabhupada didn't cut it off, they can come back to Prabhupada, which a lot of them, or most of them, have done over time. If not in this life, they will do it in future lives. Prabhupada will always be there for them. So, here we see that Krishna cannot entrust, and that's a very important word. He cannot entrust the transference of transcendental knowledge to just anyone. And he says, "I see that Uddhava, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me. So what happened was there were a lot of the initial 11 gurus that fell down. And because of that, they violated a sacred rule of disciplic succession, and that is a pressure or a pressure that's exacted on the gurus. On one hand, they are, let's say, in factual sense, an idiot compared to their guru. And on the other hand, they are the supreme guru in the eyes of their disciples, or the most significant guru in the eyes of their disciples. So there's this pressure. On one side, they are the humble servant of Srila Prabhupada, and as Lord Chaitanya said, my guru thought that I was not qualified to understand the Vedas, so he told me just chant Hare Krishna. Well, obviously Lord Chaitanya was eminently qualified to study the Vedas, but he accepted the humility or the humble position of being not qualified to explain the Vedas, and he followed his guru's instruction of chanting Hare Krishna. That doesn't mean he didn't explain the Vedas. He explained them correctly to Prakasananda Saraswati Thakur and others, but he always remained humble and meek and surrendered to his instructing or initiating gurus. So that's to give an example of how one should be. So some or almost all of the gurus that were initially appointed by Prabhupada misunderstood that, and they presented themselves as equal to Prabhupada in the eyes of their disciples. And they tried to act in artificial ways to show that they were, let's say, a carbon copy of Srila Prabhupada. Well, the sad story is that many of those gurus fell down, and it has caused havoc in ISKCON. But that's because Guru Tattva has not been clearly explained, because if you talk about the position of the jiva, everyone in ISKCON has the same conclusion. Jiva is subordinate to the Lord and can never be equal to or greater than the Lord. But when we talk about Guru, there's a lot of discussion that takes place about, the position of the Guru in ISKCON, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did something that was revolutionary. And what was that? He wanted the movement to continue under a collegiate organization of many devotees, not having one acharya for the whole movement. So this was a revolutionary thing. And why? Because all of us are coming to Krishna from very low backgrounds, or most of us are. And there might be a few that come from an exalted background. Like, for example, one of the Goswamis was a Sri Vaishnava, and his father was a head priest, one of the head priests of Srirangam. So he's coming from an exalted background. The Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, they were born in Brahminical families, but they seem to have deviated by taking, let's say, the work under the administration of Nawab Hussain Shah, and became very wealthy prime ministers in the government of the Shah. So they were, for all practical purposes, Prabhupada says, Muslims. Now, obviously, they accepted Lord Chaitanya, and they became Goswamis. And Goswami is the most exalted position, because it means that they have no material desires. They're not influenced by the modes of material nature. They don't have any bodily identification. They identify themselves as the eternal servants of the Lord. So that's a very, very big deviation, or let's say not deviation, but a very, very progressive step from being a Muslim, let's say, magistrate or a Muslim ruler, or being endowed with tremendous power, material powers, and wealth. So, well, all of us in ISKCON, I'd say most of us, are coming from very low backgrounds, and therefore the tendency to deviate, deviation means being attracted to something in the material world, is strong still, even though we're initiated, and it requires constant vigilance and effort to remain on this track of pure devotional service. So, therefore, Krishna says, Abhichet Sudaracharo Bhajanti Mamananyabhak Sadareva Samantavyas Samyak Virisido Hisaha. So it's possible, Krishna recognizes also that even very good devotees can fall down. And if they do, if they continue in devotional service under the tutelage of bona fide devotees and do not deviate again, they're excused. And it might happen once or twice, or maybe even 3 times. But if it happens any more than that, they're not going to be excused anymore, because it becomes a habit of pretending to be a devotee and then breaking the principles and doing nonsense. But it may happen a few times in their life, hopefully not more than 2 or 3 times, and they can be excused if they continue seriously in Krishna consciousness. Now, the most, let's say, extreme example of that is this one devotee who murdered another devotee. And basically he was caught and prosecuted, and he's in jail for life. But in jail, he reverted back to being very, very strict in following Krishna consciousness. At least that's what we're told. And he's chanting his rounds every day, and he's preaching to the other people in jail, and he gives them books, and he teaches from the books, and he teaches them how to offer food, and eat prasadam, and so forth. So therefore, that devotee, although he committed a heinous crime, horrible crime, he murdered another devotee, still he is considered a devotee because he's continuing in devotional service. But if one makes a habit of committing egregious sins and then chanting Hare Krishna again, but doing it frequently, they're not excused anymore, because that verse does not give you give any of us a license to do such things on a continual basis. It's only because of an accidental fall down due to incipient, or due to subtle attraction to material nature still that hasn't been purified in the heart of the devotee. Okay, so these are all very important points. We see that Krishna is extremely merciful, that he also recognizes that it's difficult to become a pure devotee. Therefore, if there are some mistakes that are made, they can be excused if one continues under the tutelage of bona fide devotees and stays strictly on the path of unalloyed devotional service. So these are some interesting points today from this verse. And are there? No, there's no one here right now, so I'm not going to ask for any questions. So now we will have Guru Puja. If you have any questions, you can ask them tomorrow or send me an email. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bando Muri Savadana Bando Muri Savadana Mate Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bando Muri Savadana Mate Bando Muri Savadana Mate Janara Prasade Bhai Hemavatoriya Jai Janara Prasade Bhai Hemavatoriya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Krishna Prapti Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Shri Guru Jaraha Jaraha Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Arana Koriya Asa Arana Koriya Mane Asa Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttamagati Shri Guru Charane Rati Uttamagati Ye Pasade Pure Sarvasa Ye Pasade Pure Sarvasa Chachudana Dila Jay Janme Janme Prabhu say Gandhi Lal Jay Janme Janme Prabhu say Divya Gyani De Prakasita Divya Gyani De Prakasita Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vina Sajate Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vina Sajate Vedegai Janara Charito Vedegai Janara Charito Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokanath Lokera Jivana, Lokanath Lokera Jivana, Lokanath Lokera Jivana, Prabhu Kura Doya Deya More Padachaya, Prabhu Kura Doya Deya More Padachaya. Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana, Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana, Aha Prabhu Kora Daya, Teha More Padachaya, Aha Prabhu Kora Daya, Teha More Padachaya, Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana. Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana, Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokanath Lokera Jivana, Kaha Prabhu Kura Doya Teha More Padachaya, Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana, Ebeas Kusukti Bhuvana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram, Hare Hare. Bolo Hari Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Premanande Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajagachasta Tadasatana Shri Shimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Namakacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakunda Raha Kunda Giri Vardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Gangamaya Ki Jai, Chamunamaya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories The Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavani Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu. Namaste.